The very, very good question. Before that, I just want to add one thing.
I asked it.
There's a very, within maybe sometimes just 1 hour, you've got candidates in your hiring manager's inbox, and they're going, "Wow,
how in the hell did you do this?" Any Joe Schmo or Jill Schmo coming out of high school or even middle school, honestly, can become a recruiter. Hey everybody, welcome back to the 10X Candidate Experience Show. Today, I've got a really great guest. We're going to be talking about candidate experience, especially from the recruiting and staffing side. We've got Gavin Johnston. Gavin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So Gavin is a trainer, a coach, a recruiter, and he's launching a bunch of new stuff around training recruiters how to start their own business and how to become a recruiter, right? So I know I just introduced you, Gavin, but why don't you give me a couple seconds around that?
All right. Well, thanks for that, Jeff. Yeah, it's, I've been a recruiter for 18 years. And what I definitely noticed in the last few years is a lot of people have got a lot of questions about recruitment. And often they don't know where to go really to find an answer to all these questions. And so I started looking at that in parallel to having my recruitment business. And last year I launched Everything About Recruitment with the aim to help as many recruiters as possible be as good recruiters as they can be.
It's important, right? Because there's no certification that is required for becoming a recruiter. Any Joe Schmo or Jill Schmo coming out of high school or even middle school, honestly, can become a recruiter. There is no college degree in recruiting, right? So what benefit is it of you taking your course, if you will?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, zero barriers to entrance. And, if you look at the UK, for example, 50% of all recruitment agencies are one person, which is crazy if you look at what impact it has on the economy and how many people it actually helps. So what my aim is a number of things. First of all is make recruitment easier by having a methodology. If you look at successful recruiters, they all know how to go from A to Z through the whole recruitment cycle, and they know at each step of the way what they need to do. They need to know how to deal with the candidates. They need to know how to get clients. They need to know how to not lose their candidates through nowadays very, very common ghosting. They need to be able to offer a superior service because they've got loads of competitors out there also. And so the aim that I've got is really to teach an approach, a methodology whereby I'm never going to say that recruitment is easy, but that the recruitment process is as easy as possible on every single step of the way.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, recruiting is easy. It's simple, but it's not easy, or whatever the saying is, right? Learning how to recruit, it's a lot of bit of sales, a little bit of marketing, a little bit of social media management, messaging, copywriting. You have to know so many different skill sets. It is really confusing and quite intimidating for the brand new recruiter, right? So where do you start? I mean, do you start on the candidate side? Do you start on the client side, client acquisition? Where do you even start with this stuff?
The very, very good question. Before that, I just want to add one thing.
I asked it.
There's a very important thing that you didn't mention.
Yeah.
Psychology. For me, there's quite a lot of psychology on how you deal with people. We are all different. We all have different needs. And so that for me is also something that we need to understand, we need to grasp, we need to be aware of it, and we need to master. So where does one start? For me, without a doubt, the number one thing to do once you've got an agency or once you're recruiting already is choose a niche. Yeah, there's a lot of things to be done before if you're going to start an agency. That is a lot of research into what you're looking for, about what you really want to get out of it. And that's actually part of my upcoming course where I'm going to drill into that a lot to help people. But once you are actually recruiting and once you've got your business launched, number one, find yourself a niche. And most people say to me, I'm hesitating between that niche and that niche. And then I say, why? And they say, well, that one is bigger than that one. And I'm like, okay, how big are they? And they talk to me about, well, I thought it was 14,000 open vacancies. And I thought, whoa, 14,000 open vacancies. When are you going to be able to have the time to work on 14,000 open vacancies at the same time? So what I teach people is actually small is beautiful. You want to work on 3, 4 vacancies at the same time once you're up to cruising speed. And if you've got 3 or 4 live vacancies that you're working on, your aim is to fill nearly all of them. And the best way to do that is start very small, have your niche, and number 1, the candidate side. Get to know your niche. Spend the number.
Let's talk about, before we get into talking about candidates and stuff, why is it important to really, niche down into, you're saying a small area, right? Or a small segment of a population?
Imagine that you are selling something, and each time you sell it, you need to find out again what it is that you're selling. For me, recruiters who do not work in niche, recruiters who do not know their candidates, that is what they're doing. Yes, they know their clients a bit, but what are they offering? That's one of the particularities about recruitment is you've got a client side that is human and changes, and you've got a candidate side that is human and changes. And so for me, if you know your niche, if you know your candidates, and you work from your candidate out to your client rather than the other way around, you know what they want. You understand what they want. You know where they've worked. You know what salary or daily rate they want, depending whether you're doing direct hire or staffing. You know, often, if you know your candidates well, you know what their spouse thinks is going to be the reaction, which can be often important if, for example, they're working and part-time in another city. You know what their family situation is and what's important for them. For example, well, actually, I'm going to be moving in 3 months to another state. You know what languages they've got, who they've worked with in the past, what companies they've worked for, what specific expertise they've got from their experience. If you know all that, and then you're talking to the hiring manager of a client, well, you are steering the conversation in the direction of the candidate that you already know is available and interested, rather than knocking on a cold door and saying, I'm a recruiter, I've got something to sell to you, the client, not actually knowing what it is. And then you get a requirement and then you got to look. If you can steer the conversation of your hiring manager, of the conversation with your hiring manager towards what product, i.e. the candidate, is available on the market, well, you're actually doing consultative selling. You're bringing a solution to the client that, 1, your competition is not capable of doing, but 2, is much more adapted to the reality of the market, because we all know that what we're seeing in 2022 is not the same thing as we saw in 2021. The market has completely switched. We have, of course, candidates that are sometimes available, sometimes not. And so the added value that you bring to clients is massive.
So I would add to that. When I first started off 1995, I started up my candidate sourcing and recruiting business. And we were in Silicon Valley, just north of San Jose. And we were generalists, but we focused on technology positions, software engineers, hardware engineers, chip designers. That's what our main expertise was in, right? Finding software engineers, chip designers, hardware engineers, fabricators, PCB designers, things like that. And they're not easy to find, even in Silicon Valley, right? There's millions of them. There's a few less ASIC designers than there were back then, but finding a niche is really, really important. And here's why. Once you get in with a niche, if somebody said, hey, can you also do marketing? Yeah, sure, why not? But you don't want to go in saying you're a generalist. You want to go in as an expert. If you're viewed as an expert in, hey, here's what I hire, and it doesn't matter whether you're a plastics engineer or a robotics engineering expert, or whether you're just doing accountants or nurses, but you don't want to do accountants, nurses, plastic engineers, and robotics engineers. That is the kiss of death to an individual recruiter running his own desk. Why? Because you never become an expert in dealing with those candidates. Those candidates have very specific needs, wants. You never really know who the target market is. If you deal in a very specific geographic region or a very specific niche, then you really get to understand who the players are in that niche, right? Like I knew every PCB design company. I knew every ASIC design company. I knew every software engineering with embedded backend, stuff and ODBC. I knew every single one of those target companies, right? And I said, oh, they've got a group here. They've got a group here. This group is going to be too far to commute for you. This group, right? So I could cherry pick where my candidates would come from.
Yeah, the value that you're adding to both clients and candidates is massive. I've got an analogy that I use sometimes. It's this, is that if people go on holiday somewhere to a new destination, and what's going to happen is they arrive in their hotel, and what do? They go and explore. And that's exactly the same thing in recruitment. If you don't know your market, you're exploring all the time. But then that person goes year after year on holiday. They know all the right addresses to eat. They know the best beaches. They know the best places to do their shopping, and they become more effective, more efficient, happier with their holiday. And it's exactly the same thing with recruitment. That's why you want your niche to be as small as possible, because I really go very small. I say that your niche, and I'm not talking about a company, I'm talking about the individual recruiter.
Right.
Your niche should be small enough that you are the number one in the world in that niche. Number one in the world. So we're talking probably about maximum per individual recruiter. If you're doing staffing, so placing contractors, maximum, I'd say about 600 candidates. If you are placing, doing direct hire, so doing permanent jobs, then we're probably talking 2,500 candidates maximum. And they're all known to you. So it's not like, oh, I know about 10% of the market. No, you know 95% of the market on the candidate side. You know 100% of the hiring managers on the client side. And one that is often forgotten, you know 100% of your competition. You know,
that's an interesting way to go after it, because I own a couple of different companies, right? So one of them is J-Wave Staffing, and I think when COVID hit, we were, obviously we lost a lot of clients, and we pivoted a little bit, and we said, look, we need business from anywhere and everywhere. And we really haven't pivoted back to getting back down to nichifying, if you will, our sales process. So I think I might have a talk with my VP of sales and say, look, I think we need to get back to nichifying and really, really understanding that target market and the candidates in that market. Before we focus specifically on software as a service in a very specific vertical. And we knew a lot of the candidates, we knew a lot of the hiring managers, and now we've got a blanketed and we've expanded to a lot of other software as a service companies, a lot of different verticals, and we're not being as successful, not getting leads coming in the door. So I'm going to talk to him about nichifying down a little bit. It's not a word, but I'm making it up. I'm putting it in.
You know what, Jeff? I mean, when I was working full-time as a recruiter, and this is going back quite a few years, because I've only been doing it part-time, I've been experimenting with different things since 2015. But when I was working full-time as a recruiter, I mean, I was making quite a bit over $1 million a year. And it wasn't even that difficult. I mean, for example, I didn't realize that was exceptional back then. I only found this out in the last few years that it's wow. I mean, for me, it was quite normal. But to give you an example, I placed my last ad in 2006. My boss had told me it's a complete waste of time, but okay, here's the budget for one ad. And he was right. The results were not good at all. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, why work in a way that is, for me, inefficient? I don't understand. And yet most recruiters, for me, still work in a pretty old-fashioned way.
It's very alluring, right? I mean, you want to go into a market. Most people recruiting, gurus or trainers, they teach you want to go into a market that is it's a big market and that can support your living, right? So you figure you throw enough crap against the wall, something's going to stick. That's the philosophy. And you're more of a, hey, if I throw 100 darts at a dartboard, I'm probably going to hit a bullseye, and you're looking for bullseye, right? But what you're also doing is you're moving closer to your target. If I'm 50 feet away from the target, it's a lot different than if I'm 5 feet away from the target, right? Or if I'm 5 inches and I can just place it there because I already know I've got all my darts, which are my candidates. I know who my hiring manager is, and boom, I just place it in the dot. It's easy enough, right? So I love that analogy, right? Shooting from 50 feet away versus 5 feet versus standing right there and just plopping it in, right? If you know all the candidates in that niche, and if you know all the hiring managers, yeah, you're just making matches at that point. So it should be a lot easier.
That's exactly it.
So how does that impact candidate experience though? Well,
there's a number of things. First of all, because you know your ecosystem so well, you know your client side so well, because if you've mapped your market and you might say, well, I don't know, I'm just going to invent figures here, but I've got 50 organizations that are in my ecosystem. Of those 50 organizations, I've got 8 that pay exceptionally well. I've got 4 that have got cutting edge technology. I've got 6 who've got cutting edge processes. I've got 10 who are much more relaxed to work with. I've got 7 that have got the best policy when it comes to working from home. I've got
this hiring manager is a jerk.
well, things like that, yeah. I've got 30 that will keep you on forever. I've got 8 that are much more difficult. Once you know all that, and then on the candidate side, you map what they want, what they're interested in, then suddenly you are offering them something that is 100% adapted to their needs. There's a very famous thing that happened to me. I had a client in Paris that paid appallingly badly compared to the market. And I got a requirement from them, and I contacted a few candidates that I knew didn't ask a super high rate. And then another candidate called me and said, why didn't you contact me? And I said, because you always ask premium. And I said, so why are you now talking to me about this? You know that they don't pay well. He goes, you're right, they don't pay well, but they have got one of the best supply chain systems in the world. I want in on that. Now, this was early on in my days.
Not always about the cash, right?
Well, the thing is that everybody's different. And once you've mapped what all the needs are of your candidates, you are offering them a solution to them finding the right work that none of your competitors do.
Yep. There's nothing more frustrating.
Offering them a fantastic service.
As an employee of a company, right? There is nothing more frustrating than getting into an organization and not being able to execute on whatever plans or why ever you were there, right? So if I was brought into a company and they asked me to build out a strategic recruitment marketing strategy, but they didn't have a back end, they didn't have landing pages and funnels and text messaging and email campaigns, and they're very hesitant to do or not interested in doing video, then I'm like, it's not the right fit. But if I get hired there at a really high salary, even if it were 2 to 3 times more than what I'm making now, guess what? I still wouldn't last very long because I cannot execute. And I would be coming up against wall after wall after wall. I would sure enough take a lateral move if it was, a very progressive company and wanted to start executing on some of these recruitment marketing strategies, right? That they can't be desperate though, right? They can't be desperate to, fill these roles because they're about ready to collapse or something like that. It's got to be still a good opportunity, right? Yeah. But candidate, you don't know until you talk to the candidate. You have to find out what their motivations are. It's just it. And the closer that you can match your motivations to the client motivations, the better off you're going to be. Stop throwing crap over the fence and hoping it's going to stick to some wall.
Absolutely. And actually, I'd go even one step further, because what you then do. So, for example, one of the things that I map is who they get on with. So I ask my candidates, who do you like working with? And I take notes of this. And so if, for example, there's a new big project and one of them goes there, I will be in contact, of course, with the hiring manager here. And when they need somebody, I'll go, I know who's going to work out well. And I'll go there and I'll find the people that like this person and propose them. Because, of course, it helps on the sales side, because often the client will ask advice of their external guru or the person they've just hired. Do you know anybody? Do you recommend anybody? Oh, look, I've got this CV in. In America, you call it resume, but I've got this resume in. What do you think about that? And of course, I'm presenting a resume that they go, oh, I know him. He's great. Or she's amazing. So one, it helps my sales process, but two, it helps the candidate because I've mapped all this.
Yeah. If you have the really strong and deep understanding of the candidates, the markets, the players, the hiring managers, it makes it that much easier, right? So, and this is all great, but how do you get in and actually talk to these hiring managers? Because these hiring managers are tough to get in touch with now. A lot of people are working remotely. They're not picking up their phones, even if they, are in the office. So how are you breaking that barrier of getting these job descriptions? Are you starting with a candidate first and bringing the candidate to the hiring manager? Or are you going to the hiring manager and say, I'll go out and get 10 candidates for you? How are you doing this sales process?
Definitely candidate first. 100% candidate first.
Okay.
I never go knocking on doors and cold calling. So I do most of my contacts by phone. If I don't have, like, for example, I had a requirement and it was one guy I knew from, well, we've established 10 years ago and I hadn't spoken. I didn't have his cell number. And so then, of course, I had to send him an email. But normally I've got the numbers. I keep everything. I've got, my mobile phone, my cell phone is my treasure trove with all the numbers and all the ways of contacting.
Don't drop it in the toilet, right?
That's for sure. That's for sure. Backed up twice, by the way. But yeah, start with a candidate. So I get most of my leads from my candidates. And this is the great thing, is that once you got leads from candidates, there's only one kind of lead that comes: live requirements. It's not, oh, that company was hiring 6 months ago, I'm not interested in that. Or, oh, that company might be hiring in the future. I don't care. What I care about is what is right now. Which hiring manager has got a pain? And I come and I bring the solution to that pain point. And so the idea is to come from the candidate. Often candidates know from three different sources. Either they saw an ad somewhere, or somebody they know is there already, and they've told them that there's a hiring need, or they got contacted by one of my competitors. Either way, I tend to be able to get enough information to be able to go in and talk to the hiring manager. Now, we're coming back to what I said in the beginning. I've mapped these clients. I might not know what their phone number, their direct number, their cell number is initially, but it tends to be reasonably easy for me to find it, either through the candidate himself or somebody who's already there, or going through the switchboard. There's nothing easier than saying, I've been trying to get a hold of such, or I've been told to call such and such, please put me through to their cell number. And then they don't answer because they see a number they don't know. And it's and often it gives you the number of which you're trying to call. Say, number is not available. That happens very often. The other way of doing it is to say, because the first 1, 2, 3 years that you're doing this, your name is not known in the market, but afterwards your name is known. So for the next 20 years, your name is known in the market. So even hiring managers you've never spoken to, there's a good chance they're going to recognize your name because your name came up in conversation. And so suddenly you contact them through LinkedIn, through an email, through whatever channel, they're going to go, oh, that name I recognize. And they're going to be much more open to talking to you than if you're just coming as a cold call as somebody they've never even heard of.
Right.
There's a lot of
Gavin,
work to be done around this,
completely different approach than how I've always done it, right? And when I came from RPO, you didn't have the ability to pick and choose, who the clients were. I was developing candidate recruitment, engagement, and sourcing strategies, right? 90 different clients, 100 some odd countries around the world, 28 different languages. I didn't have the luxury of saying, well, I'm not going to work on CNC. I'm not going to work on machinists. I'm not going to work on, pipeline drillers. I got thrown everything and anything, and I had to figure it out, right? Obviously been pretty successful in my career, but I think that times have definitely changed, and RPOs have always been kind of generalists because they've had to be, and it might be good to kind of niche down and figure out what is really what we want to work on. How does this scalable though, right? And you may not know this because you've always kind of worked as an individual recruiter, I assume, right? But could you build like a nest of recruiters that have a specialization in, let's say, robotic engineering or plastic engineering, and we get 5 or 10 of those recruiters together, and they just pound out the entire, map out the entire industry? That's one way I could see that we could scale this.
Yeah. So the first 10 years, I was working in agencies.
Okay.
The first 9 years I worked for one, and we were 12 recruiters, and we all did the same thing. So we only did Oracle e-business suite.
Okay.
That's all we did across Europe. We controlled Europe. So me and a guy working with me, we did the French-speaking countries. We had 2 people in the Netherlands, 4 people in the UK. We had 1 person on the German-speaking countries, and then we had 3 people working on the big multinational projects, like, if like an American or a Japanese or British company came with a worldwide deployment, we covered all their European deployments. Yeah. But the great thing about it is that our repository of candidates, I mean, you're going to put this in perspective, yeah? So 12 recruiters, we had less than 4,000 candidates.
Wow.
This is turnover, so this isn't margin, but we turned over 27 million pounds sterling. So in those days, it must be about $36 million, the 12 of us turnover. I mean,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's more than 2 million a piece, right? So
yeah. And of course, what happened is that because any knowledge you've got on the candidate side, you can spread it throughout all recruiters. So you're supporting each other. You know, what we did also, and this was a great thing, is that as a background thing within the agency, we had all sorts of little competitions, and the competitions were aimed that it wasn't a solo win. It was a team win. So we tried to get as many people to work together to support each other. And then we had like real fancy weekends away, tickets for whatever, free flights and things like that. And when you put that into an agency, you create this team working and this idea of cohesion and working together that brings the whole agency up to another level. And like staff turnover with us was minute. I mean, everybody says, yeah, but if you're doing 360-degree recruitment, the top guys will leave very quickly. I was the first guy to leave after 9 years. Yeah,
if you're making that kind of money, you ain't leaving.
Well, in the UK, people go solo, but in the US, that's maybe different. But it's you've got the solo recruiter just minding his desk, and he's got a difficult job. But it's true that there's a whole thing around it. And if you get all that right, wow. I've got an ex-colleague who started in the Workday arena, and he became phenomenally successful with that. And now he's got his SAP running beside that. And I think they've got 60 recruiters, and it's all following the same model. So it's definitely possible. It's definitely scalable. It's definitely scalable. Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, I'd say this, it actually becomes easier if you scale it with 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 recruiters.
Yeah. Absolutely. Being a solo recruiter is very, very difficult, right? It's
Yeah.
doable, right? But
Doable, yeah.
being able to, tap into the knowledge and skill sets of other recruiters and just having that camaraderie. And, for me, I was never very good at like developing my own scripts. So if I had somebody that was good at, they could talk the talk just very naturally on the phone or whatever, I'd steal little snippets of what they're saying, and then I incorporated it into my script, right? And just try and make it a little bit better, make it a little bit better, make it a little bit better. Most recruiters, when they're working by themselves, they say the same thing over and over to the candidates, and that's fine. You get into habits, but eventually you start getting into some bad habits, right? Or things that, markets change, and people don't call you back as much, or people don't respond to their email or their text message. But you can change up your messaging or your copywriting to make sure that you're answering those questions to get them to call you back. There are tactics and techniques that I've developed to, increase candidate response rate by as much as 30%. So it can be done. You just, but if you're in your own little bubble, then you tend not to be as innovative, I find.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And the great thing about working with a team is that you hear somebody talk to somebody, you think, oh, I'd forgotten them. And then suddenly it triggers a whole other line of thought.
Should have called them first.
Yes.
That helps with the competition, right? So anything around like how, obviously you're using, all the normal channels, job boards and LinkedIn and things like that. What about for finding out who the hiring manager is for those jobs? I mean, the jobs are posted, but how do you dig around inside? Hey, I'm trying to find the hiring manager for XYZ job. Is that how you're doing it?
So there's different ways. The first thing is that I've initially already mapped my client market. So I've got a rough idea of who is in charge of which team in my ecosystem. Yeah. Now, of course, sometimes it's that level, sometimes it's that level. It varies depending on exactly which profile you're hiring. So you might have an organization that has got 5, 6 hiring managers. There's different ways of looking at it. The first thing is that, of course, what I do is I follow them all on LinkedIn, because sometimes they post an ad themselves and they're like, oh, thank you for that. Yeah. That's a freebie. Yep. That's one way. Yeah. That's one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is, obviously, again, leads from candidates. Oh, I heard that such and such was interviewed by this person. Oh, you see, I'm going to say something that is very, very maybe strange to hear, but in business, in the normal world, they always say to you, be proactive. I say in recruitment, be reactive. The reason is that I often come the last to the show. I'm not always the first person. I'm not breaking down the doors saying, use an external agency an external recruiter to find your people. That's not me. I let my competition do all the hard work there. But all the time they're doing that, I'm talking to the candidates. I'm spending all my time talking to them, building the relationship there. Because once there is something here with a new client, these guys know me so well that they're going to give me leads. They're going to feed me so much information that I can put it all together. And so often they're going to go, oh, I got interviewed at such and such. And I'll know, oh, was it with John? Oh, yeah, it was with John. How do you know that? Because I've already had the information. And that just sort of puts it all together. And I know John's the person I've got to call.
So is there a critical tipping point on how many candidates you kind of need until they start? I can see this kind of feeding itself, right? Like,
oh, it absolutely feeds
so is there
itself.
a critical tipping point? Is it, 10% of the market, 20% of the market? Where does that kind of start generating its own leads?
I got that really started after 18 months with me, which was about a bit over 60% of the market.
Okay.
But the thing is that you start very, very slowly, and then it's exponentially accelerating, And okay, 60% was after 18 months, but within a bit over 2 years, I knew at least 93, 94% of the market.
Yeah.
And the last, I'm not at 100%. Nobody's ever at 100%.
No,
I would say I'm probably
yeah.
about 97%. Those last few percentages took me a few years, but the getting to 93,
It's so incremental, who
95,
cares, right? Because
yeah,
there's always people retiring and dying and,
yeah,
leaving the market or changing careers and things like
yeah.
that. I
And
mean,
typically those few
4,000 people, you're
percentages
gonna have
don't
10,
know.
20% changing out every single year, right? So,
Yeah. But of course, what you see for me, don't forget in Europe, we move less than in the US. Huh? But
yeah,
for me, those last few 5, 6, 7% are typically people who just don't move. They're just there. And they're
yeah.
probably not a good candidate in any case, because they're not going to move.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, there's always people that are happy with what they're doing. They're happy with their boss, and they got their friends, and they go out to beer on Friday or happy hour or whatever, and they got it, right? They're done. They don't need to go. I'm going to retire from this place. I would not say that is the vast majority of experiences in corporations today, but
No.
certainly there. So what else you got there? I mean, you have a new book coming out. You got a new training series coming out. What else you got on your plate there?
So my next big thing is getting this ebook out on how to start your agency. I want to go right just up until the moment you start, plus let's say 3 months, because a lot of questions come to me from that about that. And a lot of people they don't know where to look. They don't know what to think about. They don't know how to budget it. They don't know how to make a business plan. They don't know how to do anything. And so I'm making this, it's quite short. It's around 35, 40 pages. But it's like I've got to think about that. Oh yeah, I've got to think about that. And I give ideas about where to find it. So that's coming out in the next few weeks. I've got my course, Successful Agency Recruitment, which is that's a big one. That's 30 modules covering every single aspect of recruitment, 8.5 hours of video, and the pleasure of doing Q&As with me every week if they've got any questions, plus I've got loads of exercises in there to really apply all the material that I teach.
That's good.
So yeah, I think that's very important, because I don't want to just throw videos at people and then what? So I really have got loads of questions, loads of exercises that they've got to think, oh yeah, and how to apply the course material. And then every week they get an hour with me, so that they can follow up on things. So that's the big course that I've got for the time being. And yeah, Jeff, I mean, you know as well as me, recruitment, there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want to do, and it's I would say 80% ready, but I hope to have it maybe in the fall, I'll have it ready, is a course on market mapping.
Nice.
I get a lot of questions about how do I map my market,
Yeah, most people don't even know it. Why don't you take 10, give me a quick snippet about what market mapping actually is? Because, I know what it is. I've done it for 25 years, but a lot of new recruiters have no idea, how to develop a target list, how to develop, a market map, and things like that. So what is it, first of all?
I think the interesting thing about your question is, what is it to me as opposed to what is it maybe to my competition? Because for me, imagine a map of the world, and imagine that is the size of your niche. Every single area of that map, every single piece of that puzzle, you want to know what it is. And so my competition might say, oh, but I've got the countries there. Yeah, The pieces in place. I can see the countries. Whereas me, when I map my market, I will go there and the rivers will be visible, the main towns will be visible, the borders will be visible. And I like to go really, really deep to have a really clear picture of what that map is. And the aim is that it becomes such second nature that you know all this information about candidates, clients, and competition, that you can start doing this part-time and still make $1 million a year. That for me is real market mapping.
So what we used to do is, to get a really good understanding, is you have to do competitive target analysis, right? So if you're looking for robotic engineers, and there's probably only going to be a handful of competitors and that you can pull from. And then there's going to be even fewer in your local geographic region. So you don't have to relocate candidates out of the region, right? Because relocation is expensive. And then there may be, even though, yes, they're robotics engineers, but are they working on space modules or, things that go up into outer space, which is a completely different or niche within a niche within a niche, right? So you really have to understand, okay, this company only does, space robotics, and this company does, chemical engineering robotics or what, automotive manufacturing robotics. And once you understand who the players are, and let's say the size of the company, let's say you pick a specific niche and it's robotic engineers just for automotive manufacturing. Great. But there's big companies in that. They might have 10, 20,000 employees. And then there's little ones and it might only have 10 employees or 50 employees. You have to know every single one in between, and you have to know who the hiring managers are at every single one of those in the robotics engineering teams. Yeah. Obviously, the 10,000 employee company, they may have 50 hiring managers. The one down there that only has 10 employees probably only has one. It's probably the owner of the company, right? But you need to know who's making those decisions. That's how we used to do it. Then it also, you can segment by revenue, right? A company, a candidate that's working at a 10,000 employee company is very different. If they're a robotic engineer, is very different than one that works at somebody with 50 employees. With 50 employees, you got to wear a lot of different hats. With the 10,000 employee, you're only doing one thing. They give you one hat, maybe two, right? That's it. And there's very different skill sets that go along. So knowing how and where they can go up and down that food chain is kind of very important.
Yeah. For me, mapping is actually down to individual hiring manager level. It's what we were saying earlier on about, are they difficult to work with? Are they easy to work with? You need to know that. For me, if you map your market properly, that's the level you need to know.
Okay.
Because as you say very well, there needs to be that match. Your candidate, when you place your candidate here, you do not want them to say, well, after all, it wasn't something for me after a few months.
Yeah.
Because you're going to look bad as a recruiter, because they always blame you, whatever you do. Yeah. And secondly, you're basically doing work for nothing.
Yeah.
You suddenly have got 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 hours of work that you can do again to keep your client happy. And that is not good.
Yeah.
So if you've mapped down to the level of, on this side, everything that they want, what their wife, their husband wants, what their kids want, what they know, where they've worked, who they've worked with, what their expertise is, down to the deepest level. If you've mapped all that, and then you put all the same things that you know on the client side together, that's how you're going to make successful placements. And of course, when you go down to that level, well, you can't have too big a niche because you're not going to remember it all. Obviously, you're going to use your ATS to help you a bit, but a lot of it is going to be up there. And if you are niching down enough, well, it's just there. You know it. You talking to a hiring manager for the first time, you know straight away during that conversation who the best candidates are and who you'll be picking up the phone to talk to as soon as that conversation is finished. And therefore, you're steering the conversation in the sense of, yeah, but what salary could you offer? No, those two won't work then. Okay. Oh, and they need to have that also. But then those three can. And that's how. And, within maybe sometimes just 1 hour, you've got candidates in your hiring manager's inbox and they're going, wow.
How in the hell did you do this?
Exactly.
If you did it the other way around, and you had to go out and find the candidates, it'd probably take you 3-4 days, most likely, right? Especially if you're grinding away on that phone, you can get it done faster, but it's going to take you some time to generate the candidates if you generate the rec first, right? And that's how most recruiters do it. That's how they're taught, is get the rec and then find the candidates. You're doing it the exact opposite, find the candidates. So if I own a recruiting firm, right? And I've got, let's say, a team of recruiters. I take one of those recruiters. How many candidates, brand new recruiter, I just hired them today. the first thing I'm going to do is, obviously, if I'm following your methodology, is I'm going to put them on the phone talking to candidates. How many candidates before, is it 50, 100 candidates? How many conversations do they need to have a week for it to make it viable before they can start calling hiring managers?
Before they start calling, I would say spend 2 weeks mapping the market on the candidate side.
Okay.
Just as an investment, because once you've got a long list of names, you can prepare, you can get as many contact details as possible. You're going to be much more productive once you start calling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what I would say is, this is not an instantaneous, oh, I'm doing my first placement in my first month. It can happen, but that's not the aim. The aim is to have a really long-term, super high return on investment as of, let's say, 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. But what you're basically doing is you spend the first 2 weeks really mapping as much as possible on the candidate side. In the evenings, I mean, of course, that's what we do when we start off as recruiters. In the evenings, you take all the resumes and all the information you get off LinkedIn. And on the client side, you make your list of all the clients that you see on the resumes of where these people have worked, because you know that that's going to be your target for mapping on the client side. Yeah. And then you start calling. And you basically, your only aim is to get to know them and they get to know you. So one of the things you can very easily do is, I'm a recruiter, I'm in your ecosystem, I'm specialized in your kind of profile. Can you please talk to me about what you do, what you're interested in, what would be an ideal next job, what you would accept, what you wouldn't accept, etc. And you do that for, again, I would say 2 weeks. And when you start talking to people on the second or third time, that's when the leads start falling. Yeah. And then it's exponential. Because as soon as you've placed one, their tiny ecosystem of 4 or 5 candidates know about you. And then that grows again exponentially, And that's why I say 6 months. And most recruiting managers will go, I can't wait for 6 months. I go,
I need you to make placements today.
Yeah. When I started, I was trained in what I'm training people. I was trained, and I was told, so I was doing staffing. And I was told by my operations manager, he goes to me, Gavin, it would be fantastic if you could beat, the person was my boss. And I go, so what do I need to beat? And he says, you need to have 24 contractors out within 18 months. I made 1 placement in my first month with the help of my boss. I made my second placement in month 4. So you see, there was quite a gap, huh? After 18 months, I had 24 contractors out. I was bringing in, what was it? It was, so 60,000 euros. So in those days, it was probably about $82,000 margin a month, 18 months. So slow start, but once you're there, I mean, you're there,
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the system. It's an investment, but the return afterwards is fantastic.
Awesome. So Gavin, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the 10X Candidate Experience Show. Guys, I'm going to put all Gavin's links down below in the description. I'll get you a link to his ebook when it's available, his training, his website, his LinkedIn profile, everything like that. Gavin, any last thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me. And I just hope the general level of recruitment can increase. You know what I think about that. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Fantastic. Everybody, make it a great day. Bye-bye.